Well, good afternoon. We're going to spend a few minutes here this evening. This is our last uh, live audio and video lecture. Uh, we're going to spend a few minutes here talking about three bonus chapters. Bonus chapter A, bonus chapter C, and bonus chapter D. Bonus chapter A, working with the legal environment. Bonus chapter C, managing risk, and then bonus chapter D, managing personal finance. So our learning objectives for bonus chapter A, define business law, distinguish between statutory, common law, and explain the role of administrative agencies. Define tort law and explain the role of product liability in tort law. Identify the purposes and conditions of patents, copyrights, and trademarks. We've talked a little bit about that before, but we'll expound on it here this evening. Late this afternoon. Describe warranties and negotiable instruments such as those covered in the Uniform Commercial Code. List and describe the conditions necessary to make a legally enforceable contract, and describe the possible consequences if a contract is violated. A lot of learning objectives in this bonus chapter A. Summarize several laws that regulate competition and protect consumers in the United States. Explain the role of tax laws in generating income for the government and as a method of discouraging or encouraging certain behaviors among taxpayers. Distinguish among the various types of bankruptcy as outlined by the Bankruptcy Code. And finally, explain the role of deregulation as a tool to encourage competition. All right. We need to have laws because we're a civilized society, although sometimes many of us might think that that's not correct. The judiciary is one of the three branches of government in the United States. That is true at the federal, state, and local levels. We have the executive, president, governor, mayors, city commissioners, the chair of the city commission, or whatever that person happens to be called. And then, of course, we have various courts. We have the Supreme Court and various appellate courts in the federal system. That we have state courts, and many states have Supreme Courts and appellate courts as well. And then we have courts at the local level, circuit courts in many cases, other courses, common pleas, etc. So there are many different types of courts, and they hear various and sundry things. We also have courts that only hear civil cases, courts that only hear criminal cases. Trial courts hear both civil and criminal law cases, whereas appellate courts, and that includes the United States Supreme Court, will hear appeals from the losing party at a trial court level. Now, trial court level also includes the federal district courts where trials are held. Above the federal district courts, there are not trials as we think of them. We have the appeals process. We have several types of law. We have criminal law, and that's here somebody is brought to the bar to answer charges from some misdeed that he or she did, and could be crimes. Crimes are usually, in many cases, are things that we know. Always we know, and of course the big one today is the breach of cybersecurity. we have issues with that. One of the reasons we have issues with cybersecurity today is because the laws enacted by the various legislatures have not kept up with the challenges of what we find in internet, to use just a general term. Then we have civil law. These are non-criminal acts. And they could be divorce cases, personal injury, as I've mentioned here, and other type things, suits for various and sundry reasons. And then business law, which talks about the rules, statutes, codes, and and regulations that govern business transactions. These are the major types of laws that we have that we see in the United States, and most of what we have in the United States, pardon me a second, most of what we have in the United States stems from our founding fathers who got the law from, for the most part, from the English. The English were most successful in colonizing the United States. We did have French and we did have Spanish as well. I'm not talking about the Native Americans now, unfortunately, but we had those, but the English sort of won out. And when we became a country on our own, we followed English common law, which is the next thing. Statutory law is law that has been enacted by a legislative branch of government. And these laws are laws that we follow, federal government, state and local governments. Common law, which I was referring to before, English common law, is things that are precedents in a way, which we see next. But these are decisions that have been handed down by courts. And notice what is then called, it is unwritten law. Now, why is it unwritten law? Well, it is a decision that has been rendered by a court, and it has been followed by other courts and accepted as law. And then we have precedents. And here we have decisions that have been previously made, and judges refer to them to help them in reaching the decisions that they make. And they will refer to precedent. You hear that all the time. We hear mostly about what happens in the Supreme Court at the federal level. We hear that more often because it's more widely covered. And yet the Supreme Court of the United States only hears about 150 cases a year. Maybe a few more than that, maybe a few less than that, but 200 would be a large number for them. And they will refer, the justices in their decision will refer to a previous law, perhaps something in the U.S. Constitution. And so that's where we get this idea about precedent. So those are the laws that we talk about. Now, to carry out the laws or to enforce the laws, maybe as a better way to say that, we have, pardon me, many administrative agencies. And the power, and I'm speaking here mostly of the federal government, the power is delegated to them by the Congress of the United States. And Congress has set up these various administrative agencies, sometimes asked for by the executive, the president, but they have set up these agencies, they fund them, and they are there to, in some cases, interpret the law, but in most cases, notice what it says, are delegated power to create rules and regulations within their given area of authority. And this is where we come into this issue about, here we hear it quite often, about non-elected officials making law. Well, they don't really make law, they make rules and procedures, and they're given the authority by Congress to do that. Now, why do we have it? Well, Congress is only made up of 535 members, so 435 in the House of Representatives, 100 United States senators. There are not enough of them to go around and police everything. So we have various agencies mentioned down there: Federal Reserve, Securities and Exchange Commission, Equal Opportunity Commission, Federal Trade Commission, and the one most hated by everyone, the Internal Revenue Service. And they interpret the laws, and Congress will get, just it depends upon what parties in power or parties not in power will get their backup, collect their backup, and say these unelected bureaucrats are doing it, and forget that it is the Congress that gave them the authority to act. So when we start thinking about these things, we have to be careful about what we're saying and how we're saying it. This just gives you various administrative agencies in the United States, gives you federal agencies, state agencies, and local agencies. Is figure A1 on page A4 in your text. And you can look and see what various agencies have as their authority and what they do. Now we come to tort law. We're going to talk about tort law, and we're going to talk about civil law. Notice that tort is a wrongful act that causes harm or injury to a person, or to a person's property, or to a person's reputation. Intentional tort, that's a willful act. Somebody had thought this thing out and decided to cause this, to perpetrate this thing on a person. Negligence can also be a tort, and that is behavior that causes unintentional harm or injury. I suppose the best case of that would be the woman out west, I think Arizona, who was severely burned when opening up a cup of coffee that she bought at a local McDonald's at their drive-in window. McDonald's certainly didn't intend to cause her harm, but because the coffee was hot, she wasn't warned about it. It was considered to be a tort. Then we have things known as product liability law. And the two laws that we have here that we're going to discuss are product liability and strict liability, strict product liability. Now, the product liability says it holds the manufacturer or the business liable for harm results, notice from production, design, inadequate warnings, etc. That would be the case of the McDonald's. Strict product liability is liability without regard to fault. Now, notice here, I want to read this to you because this is sometimes where we get a little bit mixed up. A company can be held liable for a defective product even if they didn't know of the defect. And a lot of people would argue with that. But on the flip side of that is that when a business sells a product or a service to a customer, it warrants, if you will, that the product will do what it says it will do and not cause harm. Now, it may not actually use the term will not cause harm, but that is exactly what it means. Long as a product is used as it's intended. Now, of course, if somebody goes out and uses a product for something that's not intended, then we get into a little bit of dicey area, and that's for legal experts to solve and explain, and I won't try to get into that. Pardon me. These are some major liability cases that have arisen over the past about 40 years. It goes back. This goes back to 1978. Ford Motor Company with the Ford Pinto. Then we have Robbins and Playtex. Playtex was toxic shock syndrome, or people, women that use tampons and were unaware of what happened. Jack in the Box, Sara Lee, General Motors, and then the tobacco firm. So those are the major liability cases that we've had in the United States. And you can see this figure A2 on page A6 in your text. Now we're going to talk about three particular type things here that we know of with patent, a copyright, and a trademark. Now they're all similar, but they're all different. A company or an individual files for a patent that's granted by the United States Patent Office, and the individual or company has the right to that product without infringement for a period of 20 years. After 20 years, the patent goes away, and then people can be competitors can come into the market. Now, there was some nefarious people a few years ago, and they may still be doing this, known as patent trolls. And there may be another word, but that's the term that I use for them, that would actually go after a patent owner and say, wait a minute, we came up with this thing first, and you're infringing upon something that we did. And the purpose there really is to extort money, nothing else. They're not in the business, and they're just trying to make some kind of a claim. A copyright is similar to a patent, but it's different, and it lasts a little bit longer. Now, copyright protects the creator's rights, things that what is normally known as intellectual property, books, photographs, paintings, recordings, songs, etc. And a copyright normally lasts for 50 years. It can last for 100. And to use something that is copyrighted, you normally have to get permission of the copyright holder, or in the case of something that's published, now of course that can be a song as well as a book or a magazine, from the publisher or from the owner, the copyright, the person that held the copyright, from his or her heirs or estate, assuming that person is deceased. And then after that period of time, the copyright no longer exists. And then a trademark, which we talked about back in our marketing chapters, allows a company or an individual, but normally a company, to have a legally protected name or a symbol that identifies that company with the good or goods that are sold. And it also mentions services as well. If you're interested in patenting anything, I would strongly suggest that you seek out the advice of a patent lawyer. It talks about a lawyer here, but every lawyer is not well versed in patent law. I'll give an example of my dad, who was a lawyer, and he told me that many years ago that he had gotten a phone call from somebody that someone else had recommended him as a patent attorney. And Dad told the fellow, he said, I can recommend some people to you, but I'm not well versed in patents. And he turned him over to somebody that he knew in the greater Cincinnati area. Foreigners and foreign companies are eligible for patents in the United States. And a patent owner has the right to sell the product or to sell the patent to others. These are companies that, pardon me, that have a number of patents. Notice that IBM is #1 here, but Microsoft #5, and then we have 2 Japanese and 1 Korean company underneath them. Pardon me. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about here is the Uniform Commercial Code, UCC. And notice what it is here. It is a comprehensive commercial law that covers sales and other commercial laws. There are 11 articles in the UCC, and it covers a wide range of business issues. The UCC, Uniform Commercial Code, was used in all states except Louisiana. Now, that's the last I knew. Louisiana could have adopted UCC. Louisiana was still using some tenets of the Napoleonic Code, which is similar. There were some similar things there, but it was not using the Uniform Code of Uniform Commercial Code. Excuse me. Now, the next thing we're going to come to here are warranties, and we're all familiar with warranties in some fashion. A warranty guarantees that the product sold is acceptable. Notice the term acceptable for the purpose for which it was manufactured. Or if you take it another step, for which the buyer intends to use it. Now, I want to stop there and say something that there's a little problem with that statement, and that is if the buyer intends to use it for something for which it's not made, know that it's not guaranteed. So I really have a little problem with that statement. The product sold will be acceptable for the purposes for which it was manufactured. So if somebody manufactured a fork, you wouldn't use it. You wouldn't use the fork to be a surgical instrument to make an incision in somebody after they were anesthetized to perform an operation on it. So it is that the product sold will be acceptable for the use for which it was intended or manufactured. Two other kinds of warranties here that we need to think about: express warranty and then the implied warranty. The specific express a specific representation made by the seller that buyers rely on regarding the goods they purchase. So in other words, this is what the manufacturer said, the seller said. Now, an implied warranty is a little bit different in that it's legally imposed on the seller, who implies that the product will conform to the standards of trade. So a little bit difference there, and a little bit something we have to look at. Negotiable instruments. That means if you have something, you can take it and trade it in for money in many cases, or do some other things. Now, there are 4 conditions for a negotiable instrument. Now, let's go back to the forms of commercial paper that are transferable among individuals and businesses. All right. Notice that there are 4 conditions. They have to be written and signed by the person who is making the contract. They also use the term drawer, same thing. Payable on demand at a specified time. So if you go back and remember what we talked about with bonds, that's a negotiable instrument, and it is payable at a specific time. The face value is payable at a specific time. And of course, interest has to be paid at other times as well. It is made payable to the bearer, to the person that holds the instrument. And that last here, an unconditional promise to pay a specified amount. So all of those things must be present for a negotiable instrument to be legal. Next, we have contract law, which kind of in a way follows what we've just talked about. It is a legally enforceable document entered into by 2 parties, at least 2 parties, and of course you can have more. Contract law specifies what it is to be a legal document. And then a breach of contract simply is when one party fails to hold up his or her end of the bargain. It's as simple as that. Now, here are the requirements to make a contract legal and legally binding. First of all, someone must make an offer, and secondly, someone must accept that offer. Both parties give consideration. Now, what does that mean? That means that I offer you X for a certain amount and you agree to pay that certain amount. That's the consideration, offer and an acceptance of the offer. Now, that kind of goes back to the previous one, but the consideration here is usually monetary involved. Both parties are able to make the contract. That means they're not under any type of either physical or mental duress or coercion. They're free and legally able to make that. Now, of course, we're talking about things about minors come into this situation, and some states vary on who's a minor and who can enter into contract or can enter a contract, and you have to figure that one out. But if that person is underage, then while he or she may be competent, they can't enter into that contract. The contract has to be something that is legal. So if you were to buy illegal drugs from someone and you would enter into what you considered a contract to pay for whatever kind of illegal drug you want, that's not a contract. The seller could not take you to court and get his or her money back, which anything else, if it's legal, you could go to court and get the money back. And the contract's in proper form. And that simply means that it follows everything. It can be handwritten. It doesn't need to be anything other than that. As long as two people enter into it and it's signed by both parties, it's a legal contract. Now, what happens if, how is a contract breached? Well, we know a contract breach, so let's go back. This is what can happen if a contract is breached. Excuse me, I didn't pay attention to the slide. Contract is breached when one party fails to hold up his or her end of the bargain, or the contract, if you will. Now, if a contract is breached, this is what can happen. Specific performance, payment of damage, discharge of obligation. I want to talk a little bit about antitrust law here. This is talk here a little bit about the Clayton Act of 1914. And the Clayton Act prohibits exclusive dealing, tying contracts between parties, and then interlocking directorates. I'm not going to go into interlocking directorates because that can be kind of confusing. And I will tell you that even though I've read a good bit about interlocking directorates, I'm not sure I understand all the ramifications and what enters into it. But it's simply nefarious business dealing where there are parties that are not necessarily directly involved, but they're sort of on a tangent, and they're interlocked. So, you can't escape one to get a better deal from somebody else. Antitrust legislation, the Federal Trade Commission Act of 1914, also with the Clayton Act. This created the Federal Trade Commission and prohibits unfair types of competition and commerce. The Wheeler-Lee Act of 1938 gave the FTC additional control over false and misleading ads. And then finally, even though chronologically it shouldn't be finally. The Robinson-Patman Act prohibits price discrimination, and that applies to both buyers and sellers. This just gives you a history of some of the high-profile antitrust cases. United States versus Standard Oil in 1911, also the United States versus American Tobacco in 1911. American Tobacco was huge at that time, and notice it was split into 16 companies. The British Tobacco, I'm not sure that that's still around. I don't know that, but R.J. Reynolds certainly is still around. Then the United States versus AT&T, 1982, which broke up Ma Bell, and we have different phone systems today and different phone carriers today than we had back in the early 1980s and before, which essentially we essentially had one telephone carrier in the United States, and that was AT&T, and its subsidiaries, which were known as the Baby Bells. Consumer protection. It's a big issue, and notice what consumer is: a social movement that seeks to increase and strengthen the rights of consumers, as opposed to being at the mercy of the seller, which would follow under the old dictum of caveat emptor, or buyer beware. We had collapse in the real estate market. We know that hurt us and got us started into the Great Depression in late 2008, which really mushroomed in late 2007, excuse me, which really mushroomed in 2008. And we had the Dodd-Frank bill enacted, pardon me, which is meant to reform some of the practices on Wall Street. As you may or may not know, most of the folks on Wall Street have been fighting the Dodd-Frank Act almost ever since it's been enacted, and have done everything in their power to water it down. And we face a yin and a yang in this country between letting free markets run unfettered and intrusion by government regulation. Pardon me. The fact is, we do need free markets to carry out the business in the United States, but we also need regulation. Somewhere, although we've not found it yet, there is a happy medium. And we don't want too much regulation, but by the same token, we don't want the free markets to run amok, doing business as they think they can do, like they did with the securitized mortgages, etc., that got us into the morass that we're still crawling out of. This is a chart. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, about the number of consumer complaints about identity theft. Notice we went from a little over 31,000 16 years ago to the last figure I have here is 2013, I believe, to 290,000. Of course, it peaked the year before that by more than 70,000. Next, we come to taxes. Taxes, as I like to say, is a four-letter word to most Americans. I realize there's 5 letters there, so please don't correct me, but it's like a four-letter word to most Americans. We have to remember that we went to war to gain our independence because of what we thought were unfair taxes. Now, there were some other things that the British government was doing, but the unfair taxes is really kind of what pushed it along. Taxes are the way that governments raise money. Governments are limited to how much they can raise, how much money they can raise, and how they can raise money. So we always hear this. We have again a yin and a yang of, well, we need higher taxes. No, we don't need higher taxes. Let's reduce taxes on some people because if we do that, that'll be job creation, and that will trickle down to other people. I'm not going to get into the merits of that argument, other than to tell you that it's there. Here are the forms of some forms of taxes we know: income, sales, personal property, estate taxes, excise taxes, etc. Sin taxes, particularly how much you pay for a taxes in the state of New York is $4.35, and it's graduated here, what you see. What you don't see is many southern states, pardon me, that have not a high reliance on tobacco as a cash crop, but do have a lot of families that raise and sell tobacco. Their taxes tend to be a lot lower. This next slide asks if the rich pay taxes. In fact, they do. Again, I'm not going to spend any time on that. Now we're going to talk here just a few minutes about bankruptcy laws before we wrap up bonus chapter A. Bankruptcy is a legal process, as to say, by which an individual or an entity being a government, state or local, it finds itself unable to meet its financial obligations, can be, I want to use the term can be, relieved of those obligations by a court. Pardon me. Now, normally speaking, individuals are not, and institutions are not relieved completely. They are given some kind of a repayment schedule that allows them to pay on time, and then there's a way that people get the assets back. If you look at your text on page A16 at the bottom, figure A6, it shows how assets are divided. I just want to, I skipped the chart. Let me go back. Bankruptcy laws, I didn't do this. Chapter 7 is bankruptcy. That's what individuals do. Chapter 11 is reorganization. That applies to businesses. Chapter 13 is a repayment plan. And then this is unsecured claims are paid in the following order. Bankruptcy case, business costs after filing, wages, salaries, commissions, contributions to employee benefits, refunds to consumers for products not delivered, and finally, federal, state, and local taxes. And this is the slide that the figure I was referring to in your text, A6 at the bottom of page A16. Pardon me. It shows how bankruptcy courts go voluntary and then involuntary. And the way, I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but notice that in the involuntary, that's started by someone else. Debtor has to answer questions, or the case can be dismissed due to lack of evidence. And then, of course, in both cases, voluntary or involuntary, if it goes to trial, then we have creditors elect a trustee, and then trustee, what he or she does, et cetera, et cetera. These are companies that filed bankruptcy. And notice also a government, City of Detroit. Deregulating commerce. This is just things that we've done to hopefully make issues better for the consumer, and some would say that probably hasn't happened. Airline industry probably has not gotten better for the traveler due to deregulation. Now, yeah, there are some companies that were flying that weren't very profitable and are no longer around, but necessarily improved service and costs have not been contained. Telecommunications industry, some would also argue in the same manner. And then finally, some public utilities. One of the reasons that most public utilities have not been deregulated is that it's very difficult to get into that business and it's very expensive. And finally, The last slide that you see, and I'm not going to get into this, but I think it is interesting that you may want to look at, are regulations for hamburgers. You can find this at figure A7 at the bottom of page A18. That brings us to the end of bonus chapter A. It is 5:12. Let's come back at 5:15 and we will begin bonus chapter C, which is managing risk. Thank you. Please come back 5:15. All right, we're back. Managing risk, bonus chapter C. Learning objectives for this chapter. Identify the environmental changes that have made risk management important. Explain the 4 ways of managing risk and distinguishing between insurable and uninsurable risk. Define insurance policies and explain the law of large numbers and the rule of indemnity. And finally, discuss the various types of insurance businesses can buy to manage risk. All right, what is enterprise risk management? The goal of enterprise risk management is to define the risk the programs will manage, what risk management processes, technologies, and investments will be required, and then how risk management efforts will be coordinated across the firm. Enterprise risk management, and I point this out again to you because this is a term that most of us are probably not familiar with. And this is what firms do when they go through assigning and assessing and assigning risk. So what is risk? Well, basically, it boils down to, and I apologize, I don't like to use that word, but I did, to the degree of probability that a loss may occur. And then if a loss may occur, what is the potential cost of that to the business? Speculative risk means that we can either have a profit or loss, and pure risk means we don't have a chance of doing anything other than losing. How do we deal with risk? Well, obviously, you can't ignore it. It's not going to go away if it's ignored. So we have to find ways to, one, reduce the risk, avoid it. Now that is not the same as ignoring it. Avoid it means we're going to do whatever we can not to place ourselves into a situation where that risk might occur. We can insure against the risk by taking the money out of our own pocket, or we can buy insurance from a firm, and we know many of the firms around. I'm not going to get into any one particular one. These are the most costly disasters that have occurred in the United States. Hurricane Katrina, Superstorm Sandy. I mentioned those two, Hurricane Ike, because they've all been within the last 10 years. Self-insurance. Well, I think it pretty much is self-explanatory. We are going to take two kinds of risks here. One is we're going to do something that we know is going to have a risk, or we know that there may be a risk of doing business in this particular area. And the second part of that is we're going to roll the dice and say we don't think that that risk is going to occur, but if it does occur, we're going to pay for the damages. We're not going to get another party to take care of the damages. You use the term here, going bare. So that's a possibility. You have to weigh all the risks. You have to weigh all the factors in it before you decide to do that. Some risks are uninsurable. Insurance companies will not cover it. Market loss. Now, I'm going to use here loss here instead of risk. Market loss, a political change that is not welcome, a personal risk. You do things that are risky, and you know that you're probably going to have issues with that. What's something that you do that's risky? Well, it could be riding an all-terrain vehicle without a protective helmet or some other protection on you. And then operational risks for business, maybe doing things that they shouldn't be doing, maybe using unsafe equipment, maybe in outdated facilities, things of that nature. What risks are insurable? And what the company who's insuring you will do, because they have people who are analysts and insurance underwriters, etc. They must have an insurable interest. The loss has to be able to be measured. In other words, you have to know what the cost is going to be. That's why when you insure your home is insured for X amount of dollars. The possibility of the loss has to be measurable. The loss has to be accidental. Now, I wanted to get something that wasn't accidental. Like yes, an act of God or an act of nature is not considered necessarily accidental. Some policies may cover that, but they may not cover all parts of it. So you have to look at I'm talking here about homeowners, you have to look at your policy. The risk should be dispersed over a wide number of wide areas. And of course, then finally, the insurance company can set standards on whether or not it's going to accept the risk. Public insurance. This is, you can see this in your text on page C15, excuse me, C5, at the bottom of that page, figure C1. And these are public insurance things. Unemployment compensation, Social Security, National Flood Insurance Association, Federal Crop Insurance, Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation. And that ensures the pension plan that you had, that if the company finds it's no longer able to pay a number of those. We know what an insurance policy is. It's a contract written between an issuer, in this case would be the insurance company, and a buyer who would be a homeowner or business owner. And notice what it says here: promises to pay all or part of the loss by the insured. In other words, if I lost it, they would pay back to me. A premium is what I pay. That's the cost of the policy. And I have to pay so much monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or annually. Most people are better off if they pay either annually or semi-annually. They'll save money. And a claim is what we put in when we've had a loss. And a lot of people will not put in a claim for everything they've lost because they figured their insurance is going to go. So they have a minor claim. I'm just going to use the $100. They won't file that claim. But other claims they will file to make sure that they get back the money they're looking for. All right. Insurance policies and insurance companies follow the law of large numbers. You have a large number of people insured, you can ameliorate the risk. I'm still not sure I pronounced that word properly. Ameliorate the risk because you have a large number of people in the same insurance group: car owners, homeowners, etc. And because there's a large number, you can afford the losses come because you have more people putting in. So you can look at this kind of like a pyramid. It's not a pyramid scheme, it's a pyramid where you have a large number of policyholders, and then you have fewer people filing claims. So as you get up to the apex here, that's a smaller number than what you have at the bottom. And of course, homeowners policies and car insurance policies are renewable on an annual basis. Some business policies may be renewable on an annual basis, and I'm fairly certain that they are. One of the issues that's coming up for the insurance companies, and I can't go into this because I don't know too much about it, but there are many car manufacturers in a hurry to bring out self-driving cars. Well, if we have self-driving cars and they are going to be as safe as advertised, what happens to the insurance companies? What happens to the insurance world? I don't know the answers to that, but it's something the insurance companies are thinking about today. The rule of indemnity simply says you cannot collect more than what you've actually lost. So, you're not going to get any extra money. That's best way I can say that. Two types of insurance companies: the stock company and a mutual company. Stock company is owned by stockholders. It's like anything else that you would invest money in, like Procter & Gamble or General Motors or Ford or General Electric or companies of that nature. A mutual insurance company, on the other hand, is owned by its policyholders. Which company is better? I can't give you any particular answer to that. This slide just gives you a indication of companies that are stock insurance companies, some that we know: Hartford, Metropolitan Life, mutual insurance companies, New York Life and Northwestern Mutual. We know that the health insurance is a big bugaboo in the United States. Even though we have the Affordable Care Act and we have more people covered by health insurance today than we've ever had, we still have issues. Health premiums tend to keep rising. Maybe not as fast as they have, but they keep rising, and there's still some issues with the act itself. We also have things like disability insurance, which you can buy, which will pay something to you if you're out of work or incapacitated for some reason. And then workers' compensation is not paid by workers, it's paid by employers to take care of people who've been injured on the job. And they'll pay maybe wages or something while the individual is going through recuperation. Life insurance is just this is some health news here. Quit smoking, work out, figure out how much insurance you need, and don't overbuy insurance is what most people would tell you. Make sure you have a good insurance company, then find a good financial planner. Many people would tell you that the best thing for a young person to do would be to buy what's known as term insurance. So that person, especially if he has a family or she has a family, could get a large amount of coverage for not a whole lot of money, but with term insurance, it's going to run out for a while. The object there is that after a period of time, you would be self-sufficient, you wouldn't need insurance, etc. I'm not advocating this. I'm just using that as an example. Liability insurance usually bought by professionals such as attorneys and physicians and dentists, also known as malpractice insurance. And then we have product liability insurance, which covers problems with people complaining about product didn't work the way it was supposed to and cause injury or harm, etc. If you run a business out of your home, check with your insurance agent to make sure that the business is covered because it may not be. And you need to figure out what you may need or may not need. And then finally, what you need to know about home insurance, which we just said right here before, was that all insurance doesn't cover pardon me, home-based businesses. Don't buy more coverage than what you need. Small claims can add up, so you may want to pay those out of pocket instead of filing for them, and then know what your home's history is and issues that the home has had before you, not so much before you buy it, but before you get insurance. Have your home inspected so you know what you're getting into before you purchase. At 5:29, that brings us to the end of Bonus Chapter C. Bonus Chapter C and Bonus Chapter D are a lot smaller, and we won't cover as much. So we're now at 5:30. So please come back at 5:33, and we'll probably have this finished by 6 o'clock Eastern Time this evening. Please come back at 5:33. Thank you. All right, 533, our final chapter, bonus chapter D, managing personal finances. Outline the 6 steps of controlling your assets. Explain how to build a financial base, including investing in real estate, saving money, and managing credit. Explain how buying the appropriate insurance can protect your financial base. And finally, outline a strategy for retiring with enough money to last a lifetime. Here are the 6 steps to control your finances. And I'm not going to go through all of these because each is self-explanatory. But first of all, you need to know what your assets are. Prepare a budget. Pay off your debts. Start saving. And then finally, only borrow what will increase in value. This is what a household budget normally has and includes mortgage or rent, food and clothing, utilities, vehicles and furniture, insurance needs, and then other expenses, which would be utilities. These are just an interesting little bit of data here about what you would save if you gave up something and did something different. Bottled water, for instance, costs $1.50, 20 days, that's $30. If you refill a water bottle at home, it doesn't cost you anything, so you save $30. And there's some other things that go on here. Banana Republic t-shirt's going to cost you $40. Buy the same t-shirt at Old Navy cost you $12, so you're going to save $28. Just a way to save money. A few ideas. This gives you an annual rate of return. We don't have as good even as the 2% annual rate of return today, unless you're in the stock market. Of course, if you hold bonds, they're going to pay you a fair amount of rate, but most bonds, especially government bonds, you're not going to be able to do anything with for at least 30 years. Treasury bills and things of that nature, which take a larger outlay of money, will give you some nice return, but you may not want to lay out that amount of money for a treasury bill. All right. The following is what it calls here easy-ish budget cuts. Use coupons, cut back on gourmet. Eliminate the amount of charges you have on your cell phone. Reduce cable television. That's pretty difficult, although you can negotiate cable TV for the lowest possible price. Not easy to do, but you can. And you can save some money. Their basic cable is a lot cheaper than some of the add-ons. Don't go out as often. Cut down on the clutter in your house. Now, what I like to say is don't go out of your way to punish yourself. Figure out the things that you can do without and eliminate them or cut down on them. You can see ways to save. This is just a billionaires tab, and I'm not going to go through that. That's one of those I like to talk about gee whiz slides. How are you going to build your financial base? Well, live frugally. That doesn't mean live cheaply. That means don't buy things you don't need. If you're two-income family, try to live on one income. Think about buying a fixer-up home. And I will tell you this, that if you do that, you need to live in a home a minimum of 3 years to get your investment back. Of course, some people do buy fixer-uppers, fix them up, and then sell them for a profit. Buy for the long term. Don't live beyond your means. Now, this is what this frugality things, 5 rules of frugality. And I talked about it before at the time. Don't give up something you really like. Give up things that you can do away with. Uh, if you don't need to have something, it's not essential, eliminate it. You just have to make those things around. Shop for good deals. Don't impulse buy. Never go to a supermarket when you're hungry or any place else to buy food unless you're going there to eat. That's a little bit different, of course. There are some benefits to buying a home. Remember, it's considered an investment and you can live there. Of course, you could also buy a home and rent it out if you thought you could make money doing that way. The interest you pay on your mortgage is tax deductible, so that is a benefit. And remember that buying a home depends upon location. Things like school district, accessibility to public transportation, things of that nature. All various things that you really need to pay attention to. This just gives you how much house you could afford to buy. It's not something I really want to spend a lot of time on. Don't overbuy. That's something that you really have to pay attention to. This, by the way, is graphically displayed in your text figure D3 at the top of page D8. This is something you really have to be careful with, and that's credit cards. Remember, when you use a credit card, a company is giving you a loan. They are loaning you money. That purchase is a loan, and you have to pay that off within so many days. Now, here are some approaches that you can take. A contrarian approach about getting in the stock market is to buy when everybody else is selling, and just the reverse. Credit cards, I talked about, don't use them indiscriminately. And if you're concerned about interest rates, shop around for credit cards and get the one with the best interest rate. I've said before, and I'll say it again, if you only pay the minimum, it's going to take you a long period of time. The best way to do this is to pay off the credit card bill when it comes due. This is an issue that we have to be concerned with students. I realize that most, if not each one of you, is a working adult, so some of what we have here doesn't apply. But I can tell you this: more credit cards is not good, and if you give up a credit card for some reason, that goes against you on your credit report, even though you may not have owned money. So don't take any more credit cards than what you really need, and use credit cards sparingly. This is the Credit Card Act of 2009. You have to be over 21 or have an adult cosigner to get a credit card. And then consumers are protected, and you can't be charged for any more than a certain amount. This is clean credit. We've talked about a little bit before. Pay your bills on time. Don't shift balances, even though you get enticed for those quite often. Don't apply for too many credit cards, again, we've mentioned. And if at all possible, don't file for a personal bankruptcy. What's your score? Find out what your credit card score is, and do whatever you can to either keep it there or increase it. Types of insurance to buy, which really wasn't covered in the last chapter. It should have been. Term insurance I spoke about. I'm not going to discuss that again. Whole life insurance allows you to buy insurance, sometimes attractive to younger people, because it not only allows you to buy insurance, but it builds up like a savings account. And then variable life insurance is a type of whole life insurance that invests some of the cash value in stocks or other high-yielding securities. An annuity is a contract to make regular payments to you over a fixed period or for your lifetime. Two types of annuities, fixed and variable. Now, there's other types of insurance that we talked a little bit about the last time. Disability insurance, which you can buy. It can be costly. Homeowners insurance, which I recommend, and even renters insurance, which I recommend. And then you can get an umbrella policy from some companies that combine all of your insurance from one company, and it's often less costly. What I would tell you if you're interested in that is to shop around. I'm not going to discuss that one. And health savings accounts, most people can get these through their employer. Some of them you can get some tax-free here. How you buy them. Remember, they're not for everyone. Talk to your employer, make sure it's the right thing for you, the right cost, etc., before you get involved in that. Social Security, we know we pay into Social Security. We pay 6.2% of our income before taxes, and then our employer matches that. If you are a self-employed individual, you pay it twice, once as an employee, once as the employer. Social Security was never designed to be a retirement plan or a pension plan. It was old age survivors disability insurance program. Thank you. I had to read this slide because I forgot about it. Came into being in 1935. Social Security has some issues with it. The funding has some issues with it. I don't like to get into that. It tends to be a political football. But make your wishes known to your congressman, congresswoman, or U.S. senator. Too often we don't hear that. And there's some things about privatizing it and gutting it and a few other things. I really need to figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to do it and quit kicking the can down the road. Individual retirement accounts, IRAs, they are in some cases tax-deferred investments. That means you do not pay the tax until you take the money out. If you have an IRA, you have to start taking distributions at age 70 and a half. That's by law. And then tax-deferred contributions, which is what this is. When you get into them, you don't pay anything on it now, and you're taxed as income after withdrawal. Normally speaking, you'll be in a lower tax bracket. An IRA, a Roth IRA, does not give an upfront tax deduction, but earnings grow tax-free, and you're not taxed when you withdraw them. My IRA is a new type of Roth for low and middle income individuals. I don't know enough about that to talk to you about it. 401k plans come through your employer. You can get into them. An employer, in many cases, will match your contribution up to a certain dollar amount. And these are pre-tax dollars, just like we talked about with an IRA. It grows, and you don't pay the taxes on them until you are retired. Here are the benefits of the 401k, which you contributed because it's taken out pre-tax. You don't pay tax on it until your taxable income is reduced. Tax is deferred on earnings, and again, the employers will match that. A Kehoe plan is similar to a 401k, but it's for self-employed individuals, and they can be withdrawn in a lump sum or spread out over years. Make sure that you make your wishes known as to whom you want to inherit and how much you want them to inherit. If there's a large estate, it's probably good to have an executor and to make sure that assets are correctly accounted for, and then that person takes care of paying income tax, etc. Well, I mentioned that this was a short uh, chapter, which we covered quickly. I covered fairly quickly. And I would like to thank you for your attention. I will have this, this is being recorded. I'll have it uploaded tomorrow for you. Please remember there's no lecture discussion question and there's no reflection paper due for this week, just the regular discussion question and, of course, your term paper. So I thank you for your attention and good evening.